Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and I'm going to be talking about the strengths of military orders. This video is designed for anyone who is going to be playing military orders and wants to know how to play them well, or if you're playing against them and you want to know how they're likely to play, then this might be valuable to you. So military orders is characterised by having hard-hitting offensive units. They have heaps of heavy infantry, which they lean into as attack pieces quite nicely. They've got multi-wound models that are very common, and their shock immunity is quite common across quite a lot of these as a result of that. They have an excellent ARO piece, and one of the best tags in the game. Single unit gun pieces, ones that you can just throw and do quite a lot of damage, are quite common, and you might even face 2 or 3 of those in a military orders list. Most heavy infantry have good BTS to protect against hacking attacks. They also have access to one of the cool side features of the game, and that's inspiring leadership. So if you've got Joan as the lieutenant of your military orders list, if she's on the table and she's not in a null state, then all troopers that have irregular orders create regular orders. So a war corps, for example, a tech B, fairly low cost units, sadly both of those are only AVA 1, but are then suddenly creating regular orders. They also have courage, which means that you can choose to pass a guts roll, should you wish. Also, you can use the lieutenant order, if Joan is your lieutenant, with inspiring leadership, to do a coordinated order without using your command tokens, which can create that efficiency of movement and things like that. Anyone with that isn't impacted by retreat, never entering the retreat state, and it means you can take a 3-point war corps or a 5-point tech B to provide regular orders, as I've said. So inspiring leadership is one of the cool aspects of military orders. Some of the most popular units within military orders, and some of the key reasons why they're so popular, include the Teutonic Knights. They are 2 wound, BS 14, 6-2 move, armor 3 and BTS 3. Dodging on 17s, because they've got a natural PH 14 and then they've got dodge plus 3, which is really good. Martial Arts 2, CC 22 with a DA CC weapon. They're relatively low cost. You can get one on the table for around 19 points, which is insane for something that's carrying that as a base stat line. They do have access to a Tinbot profile, to an NCO, a Lieutenant, a Specialist and Spitfire options, all of which are very good. And so yeah, points range from 19 up to 31. It's also one of the most popular formations for the Harris formation there, but Teutonics can go in a military orders fire team, so you could have them in a corps. It would be mixed, but this could be a good route to do that. The Lieutenant Teutonic is one of my favourite ones to take because it is relatively hardy, it's relatively easy to protect, it's not so obvious, and then you can be using that Lieutenant order on the NCO that I also like to take. But the NCO option is just very good anyway, especially if you're taking something like the Knight Commander, which produces 2 Lieutenant options, then having the NCO Teutonic is a very good one to be considering. Another unit that you'll likely be considering if you're playing military orders is the Knight of the Holy Sepulcher. It comes with a Hollow Projector, comes with Veteran, 2 wound heavy infantry with stealth, despite being huge and chunky, armor 5, BTS 9, it's got BS 14 and CC 22 with Natural Born Warrior, plus 1 damage on both BS and CC attacks. Surprise attack when coming out of Hollow Projector, 49 to 56 points, which isn't bad value for what you're getting. It's heavy infantry, as I've said already. I take the AP HMG NCO version quite a lot because it gives me that flexibility of potentially using the NCO Teutonic or using the NCO Knight of the Holy Sepulcher. Pretty good value. Has done a lot of damage, has also died very quickly if I've used it incorrectly, so in good hands, very well worth it. Another one that's well worth considering and taking is the Peacemaker. It's the forward deployment 8 inches, it's repeater, which could be good if you're taking something like Deferson. If you're taking the Order Sergeant, Hacker, then that could be pretty good. It's got an Orc spot with a heavy flamethrower. Now that combination is just horrible, because you're either throwing up the Spitfire option, which is more expensive at 26 points. There's also a 20-point heavy shotgun version, but it's a good repeater. It's good to have on the halfway line. It's good as a throwaway early attack piece. I really enjoy doing that. 6-4 move means that you can very quick, and with 8-inch forward deployment, means that you can very easily get that up the board and in your opponent's face with an Orc spot and potentially the Spitfire, causing a lot of problems straight away. The Tikbalang, another great unit, one of my absolute favourites in the whole game. Definitely one of the best tags in my opinion. 68 points, gets you a lot here. It's got BS attack with +1 damage, which is great. It's got mimetism -3 with armor 6 and 3 structure in cover. Makes it quite difficult for you to take down. It's got tactical awareness, so that's some extra orders. Climbing plus, AP HG, and heavy flamethrower is my weapon of choice there. Again, kind of like the Peacemaker, it's one that you can throw around and attack with quite easily. However, you do kind of need to be aware of its vulnerability to things like hacking. I have had it possessed several times because I've played it too aggressively, but it does cause a bit of a problem for most people. Another one to think about is the Trinitarians. I think one of the best value infiltrating mimetism -6 camo options out there, and most of them are specialists as well, so good for objective getting. Mimetism -6, as I've said, with surprise attack, hidden deployment, and infiltration options. Should you, depending on which one you want, I generally go for the infiltration one. There's a mine layer option, forward observer. There's one that's got both of those things, which is quite good as like a barrier, but also an objective grabber. Yeah, 23 points, I think, generally, but the 27-28 points difference between the forward observer and the forward observer mine layer means the extra SWC is often worth taking, but you might need that extra SWC elsewhere, and that's often the problem with military orders. Lots of good things, but SWC actually ends up being one of your mitigating factors or limiting factors. The Knight of Montesa is excellent. So martial arts 2, mimetism -3 even before all of this. Now the carryover rules where you still get that choice option, which is good. Armor 4, BTS 6 gives it good protection. The paramedic is my favorite profile out of all of that because it's good for completing missions. It's only 29 points, but also it can run around like healing things if you need to. It can generally eat a mine thanks to its 2 wounds, but yeah, it's just one of the tankiest bikes out there. So I think most military orders will play it at some stage. It's also a fairly iconic model, and for good reason. It's definitely a lot of speed, not that military order struggles with speeds, with the Teutonics doing 6 inches, the Tikbalang, the Peacemaker and all that sort of stuff. Mendoza, don't take him as often, is a Marmite option as far as I've seen, because he's incredibly expensive at 55, 57 points, but can be a massive playmaker if played well and if things go your way. It's got mimetism -6, and is obviously only S2, and armor 4. So it's fairly difficult to hit in those gun interactions. And one of the cool things that keeps drawing me back to Mendoza is the continuous damage. Now that's on both CC attacks and on BS attacks. The idea that continuous damage could be done on something as hilarious as grenades is so overwhelmingly attractive to me. Like, you could be spec firing, I mean, if you've got the orders to burn, you could be spec firing into a room, over buildings, and if that grenade goes off and succeeds, it's just, you know, continuous damage could swing your way. But unfortunately, it's very luck-based. Like, you can't build a strategy around your spec firing working, them failing their dodge or whatever it is, and then failing successive saves for the continuous damage to really come into effect. So that's the only downside I see with him. He's martial arts 2, CC 22, BS 14, he's got dodge +3, berserk +3, forward deployment +8, so can be in the opponent's face, but there's so many points to be losing. I see Mendoza is generally very tempting for me in like a quadrant control mission, or even like a panic room situation where you could be throwing stuff in there consistently, but the points always puts me off. You know, that is a lot of points to be throwing at something when you could have something else at the same sort of cost that is equally good. Then we've got Joan. There's 2 flavours to be taken there. One with 6-2 movement, that's the mobility armour with slightly less armour. The other with 4-4 movement, but with armour 5. Various differences. So the 45.1 might be better classic gun piece and in a night hospitaller fire team. The 50.1 is better as a mobile objective option, maybe. BS 15 is obviously epic. Great in CC with CC 23, martial arts 3, and explosive CC weapon, but has frenzy, so definitely worth keeping in a fire team. But that's, I think, the only way you'd really go with Joan, is have her in a Harris, potentially a night hospitaller Harris. It could be quite good with Deferson and a night hospitaller. Expensive, but could be well worth doing. In terms of formations with military orders, they only have access to 1 core and 1 Harris. Now there's a couple of pure, if you really want to take a pure core, there's a couple of options here, especially if you want to be like boosting Joan up to insane figures. But Joan is the expensive option here. So Joan and Night Hospitallers, so the Crusade core, is a big option there. So you'd be taking Joan, some Night Hospitallers, maybe Deferson, and then Hawkins is another option there. Don't know how much you'd be taking Hawkins over other Night Hospitallers, depending on the role that you want to take. Joan will be a lieutenant. Deferson hacker with a Trinity upgrade is a good counter to hackers in general. Spitfire costs 51 points, so that's not cheap, and Joan's not cheap either. Hawkins, he's the main character from the novel Downfall. He's 36 points, has multi-marksman, great CC, and is a specialist for missions. So that could be the reason why you take him. But then you've got Knight Hospitaller. They range from 29 points to 37 points. Armor 4, BTS 6, Martial Arts Level 2, BS 14, and CC 21. You've got 2 doctor options, and it's worth taking at least one. And then if you're taking that doctor option, you don't necessarily need Hawkins as much because you've got that specialist in your group. So, I mean, here, it's expensive. I mean, the minimum you'd be spending to make that work is 161 points. But you would be giving Joan +3 to a BS. That's a lot of killing that she could do. Deferson would potentially be good. That's a good counter to hacking if you're roaming around the place. But yeah, you could offset that cost by then having things like a War Core and a Tech B with Inspiring Leadership. That means that you could get 7 regular orders for 203 points. It's still too expensive for my liking to be doing that despite the bonuses you would be getting, but I think it would be fun for you to try if you are thinking military orders. Like, give it a go once. I think it might be better taking the Harris option with Joan if you're going to do it. So Joan, potentially a Deferson, and Knight Hospitaller Doctor, and have that as more of a roaming attack option. You do lose some of that BS, but because the BS is so high to begin with, I don't think that's so bad. I think you'd still, so you'd be getting the extra burst, which is actually quite good for some of these options, and that might be a better one. Another pure core that you have available that's quite popular is a Crozier core. So this isn't pure core, this is a mix. You could do this as a pure with just using Croziers and maybe a Knight Commander to fill in that space. And that's not a bad option because you do have the MSV2 Spitfire in that group, which could be a good attack piece. You'd have a Paramedic in there. You've got things like, I think it's Panzerfausts, I think you can get hold of. You've got EM you can get access to fairly easy. So that wouldn't be the worst if you wanted that. And then obviously you get the Sixth Sense and you get the BS bonuses and things like that. So that wouldn't hurt. However, I prefer to take a mixed core using the Black Friar. So I generally take a Paramedic Crozier, 2 Normies and a Spitfire MSV2. Then I have the Black Friar with the Heavy Rocket Launcher. It's MSV2, it's not as insane, but that's a really good ARO piece, so I'm not afraid to have the Black Friar up and out from the very beginning with a Paramedic nearby so that we can go revive it and do that sort of stuff. You can hide a Knight Commander in there as a Crozier. I prefer to take with the Knight Commander the 28 point +1 Lieutenant version, but that can also be a bit of a trap because there's better options elsewhere, but having 2 Lieutenant orders, and then if you're taking the NCO Teutonic or the NCO Knight of the Holy Sepulcher, that can be a good way to be spending those orders. I do think at 28 points it might be better having a cheaper lieutenant like the 19 point Teutonic and then like a Flash Pulse bot to get those orders, because at least that's then more usable orders, because the 2 lieutenants, they can only be obviously used on the lieutenant or the NCO. So maybe better to just take a 1 lieutenant order Teutonic, which provides a regular and a lieutenant, and then using the points difference to bring another regular order in some form. If you're bringing the right Knight Commander, then the Teutonic Lieutenant, you'll want some NCO to make use of those Lieutenant options there. Then another option that could be quite popular is the pure Harris. The Teutonic Harris is my favourite option there. Now, you can take Order Sergeants, and you can take Teutonics, and I think because the Teutonics are so good and some of them are so cheap, I generally just take 3 Teutonics. And then also I've got the 3 Teutonic models, so that's nice and clean. That's a Military Orders Fireteam. 70 points gets you the Lieutenant, a Timbot -3, and an NCO Spitfire. That's the only one without the Panzerfaust, but you've then still got that for big beasties. So that's my typical Teutonic Harris. Again, +1 burst. Good for Discover rolls, which is good because there's no MSB in there. But I sometimes like to trade the 19 point normal one for a 28 point missile launcher and then use that as an ARO piece, but the lack of MSB can make that less than optimal. But then dodging on 17s, doing it on -3 because it's through smoke and you can't see, you're still dodging on 14s, which is not terrible. So yeah, it can be a good ARO bait piece there. And I like to take the Timbot Teutonic because they are vulnerable to hacking programs. They don't have veteran, and so the Timbot at least makes them slightly safer. A duo that's worth taking is the Bulleteer and Montesa Knight duo. Now, the reason for that, it's called a Knight's Fireteam, so it's very fast and can hit hard. Both have Mimetism. The Bulleteer has Mimetism -6. It is a bigger base, and they're both big bases, but still worth it. You can do that for as little as 44 points, but then both are running the shotguns because the Montesa would have a shotgun in that version, and then you'd be going with the shotgun bulleteer. You want one to cover the short range band, so one with the shotgun is actually pretty good, but you want the other to carry the team up to a slightly larger range band. So I would recommend either the Spitfire or the Red Fury. So you can take the Montesa, I think, with the Red Fury, or you can take the Bulleteer with the Spitfire. I would probably go with the Bulleteer Spitfire and use that as the more aggressive piece because of its mimetism. That's probably better to be sticking out there, and then leave the bike to kind of be there last minute, grab objectives, or move around the place. So those are quite a lot of the strengths for military orders that I see. They're tanky, they're multi-wounds, they've got high armor, they've generally got great martial arts, as you'd expect with models that basically have swords on almost every single one of them. They do have simple tricks, and they've only got a few of them, but that's quite good if you want a sectorial to play that is maybe on the simpler end of the scale, but can still hit hard and do direct attacks very well. So if you love shooting, if you love just hitting things hard, then military orders could be a really good one for you. They do have great BS. They've got excellent CC, so whether you're shooting or chopping, they do both very well. The specialists are very durable. There's not really any glass cannons within military orders, which means it's a little bit forgiving because of those multi-wound options. So in my mind, those are a lot of the strengths for military orders. Do you agree with them? Have you found that those ring true when you face them or you've played military orders? Definitely keen to hear your thoughts. Are there any units in there that you think are worth an honourable mention that you think I've missed out? I always love reading your comments and seeing what else is out there that I've maybe missed, and it's good for other people to be able to see your comments as well and get a little bit of extra information if they're thinking about playing this faction. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back soon with another one.